Please join me in welcoming Shawn Casemore.
As you're reading through that, I'm thinking, well, that's easy for you to say. So you listen to that, and I know what you're thinking already. It's been a minute. You're thinking, this guy's been in industry. What the heck does he know but not-for-profit, right? And then you start looking around each other going, who is this guy? Why are we here? What time is it? When's this done? Okay, so to start with, what I didn't include is I've been on a lot of boards, volunteer boards for not-for-profit associations, a lot of them over the years. Some of my previous employers have actually gone back and been on their boards. I've also worked with a lot of not-for-profits, and because what I find, a lot of the processes that you apply in business and in industry, manufacturing, also apply in not-for-profit, especially around engagement. So that's what I bring to the table. That probably should have been spelled out in there, but nonetheless, I want to mention that. I'll mention before we get started that there's two gentlemen actually taping this. The good news is they're not taping you. There's one directly behind you, the back. So if you stand up at any point, turn around and smile, you're on camera. But here's what I'm doing. I'm doing this for my purposes. I'm critiquing myself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm using it for my purposes for future speaking. But what I've offered to Vitalize is that if they, and hence if you want a copy of this at the end, if you go onto the Vitalize website, you can reach them and they will provide a copy to you. So I just need probably a week or so to get it edited and up and running. And if you want to come back, it'll be there for you. It's an extra resource for you, okay? So if you really feel after you leave this session that Shawn is such a great guy, I'd love to see him again, there's your opportunity. So to start with, I guess before we actually get started, Alicia came to me earlier. And she was just saying she was going to sit in the front and do interpretation. This is Alicia, everybody? And so what I said to her, kind of joking around, I said, well, you know, you can sit there, that's no problem. If I come up behind you and do like this, that's fine, right? And she said, no problem, I can make fun of your name, and you won't know either. So we've got an agreement in place that we're not going to do that. All right? Just to start with, I spent some time on a not-for-profit board, and when I thought about this session, this comes to mind. I think you'll find this maybe some parallels in the story. So I was on a not-for-profit board, and I was asked to create a member recognition program. I was asked to chair this up. So I was volunteering on the board, volunteering my time, asked to get other volunteers together who were not on the board, and then come up with some sort of recognition plan for volunteers to engage them, as well as our members. So it's a very broad program. So what I did, I went about and I said, okay, let me get in touch with some people. Let's bring this together. So I did some research. I reached out to people. I asked people who were in the association, you know, who best be suited for this. And I got some names. I reached out, called them personally, followed up with emails, and I got a number of people together, about 5. So we had a small team. And we spent probably about 8 to 9 months back and forth, you know, meetings on the phone, emails, etc., putting together this framework. We researched what we thought would work, created something that we thought would cater to our association, and went from there. So then what happened is my term ended. You're only allowed to be in that board for 3 years. So the term came to an end, but I made sure I got it to a point where it was really just going to the board for final approval and then let it be so. Fairly straightforward. So that was fine. I passed it on to the chair. He thanked me very much. I moved on. About a year later, not quite a year later, I get an email from a lady, not a call, but an email. And she introduces herself and says she's now on this board, and they're putting together a recognition program for, you know, volunteers and staff and everybody around the association. And she had heard my name, I might be able to provide some input. So I assumed, right, you know what happens, assume, right? If you don't know, come see me after, I'll tell you what that means. So what I assumed was, okay, she's gotten this document and they're going to make some changes, so, right, no problem, I'll be part of that. So a couple days later, she sends me a document. I'm like, okay, probably a good refresher. So I open it up, not my document, completely different document. Nothing to do with anything that I had ever put together. More importantly, nothing to do with anything that the volunteers had worked really hard to put together. So I called her. Her number was on Bob her email. And I said, has anybody told you at all that we already developed this? And it was really at this point, it had already been pre-approved by the board. They, you know, approved the framework. We were ready to go, just putting the details together. We did that. It was really for final approval, maybe a few adjustments. And the volunteers had been told, wait, you'll hear from somebody to finish this off. She said, no, nobody told me that. This was passed to me by the chair, who said we need to create a program. So she created one from scratch. Now she had got maybe a smaller team of 2 or 3 people. She must have been more efficient than I was. But nonetheless, came up with a program. So what I did is, of course, I went back from my knowledge and understanding what we had done, and I suggested some things that changed. So my question to you is, how do you think those volunteers will feel when that program comes out, because it's coming out shortly, or actually I think it just has come out, it took them a while. How do you think they're going to feel when they look at that and say, hey, I was part of it? Oh, this isn't what I was part of. Nobody got back to them? Nobody thanked them? Think they're going to help that association ever again? No. So when I think about all the different work I've done with not-for-profits, associations, I start to think about that example. Because in my mind, and I don't know what they say, at the last minute here, they were looking up a clicker. So we've got the latest technology that I've never seen. Have you seen this thing before? It's quite the little contraption, big antenna if you want to flip it up. Anyways, so to get started, I want to talk then quickly about volunteers and how to engage them. Okay, I want to talk about some of the challenges. So, in my mind, for not-for-profit, volunteers are some of the most important relationships you have. I mean, don't get me wrong, staff are important, but there's not always the funds to find the necessary talent and capability you need, right? So when you're reaching out to volunteers, sometimes it's because you need the capacity, sometimes it's because you need talent. So they're very important, right? And volunteers, unlike some staff, aren't getting paid. Fair enough? So, without volunteers, we lack capability, as I mentioned, horsepower to get things done. They're not-for-profits. I know that if their volunteers left, they would be well behind where they should be, right? Because they need that additional horsepower, those additional people to get things done. Talent, we talked about, and quality. If we can't get things done, if we don't have the right talent, then the quality of the work we're doing is going to diminish. So, what I want to suggest to you today, what I'm going to walk you through, is that engaging volunteers, and in essence, this is engagement. So you can apply this to staff, you can apply this to volunteers, but I want to focus specifically on volunteers, is a process. It really is. It's like anything else. And once you get the process down, and you work the process front to back continuously, you'll find you'll have better results with engagement of volunteers. Okay? There it is. That's engagement. One photo. What do you think? Have any meaning to you? Here's what I want to suggest. It's going to be difficult with water. If I dump it on here, I might go up in flames. What I want to suggest to you is that Alicia turns around. No, there's electrical equipment here. What I want to suggest to you is that if you think about a process, you think about an onion. If an onion is just an onion, fresh out of the bag, what's it good for? Anybody? You can hang it around your neck, ward off evil spirits, right? Beyond that, not so many uses. Now, if you peel that crusty layer right off the outside, it kind of crumbles. It might be good for stew, maybe, right? Because sometimes you don't eat the onions that are in stew or with a roast or something. If you peel the next layer off, now it's a little higher quality. You might throw it into soup. And by the way, I don't do a lot of cooking. I'm just guessing. And then if you take, that slimy layer, the one you can't even really peel it off, you kind of rub it off with your hands. If you take that off, now you can put it into salads or use it for whatever you want. So as you peel back that onion, as you put effort into peeling back the onion, you get to the core of the onion. And the quality of that onion improves, right? The purpose for which you're using that onion improves. It's the same with engagement. You can walk around all day and just say, hey, who do you think I should engage? I think you should engage John. Okay, I'll call John, right? John, do you want to help? No, can't help you. Okay. Or you can follow the process I'm going to walk you through, which is a little deeper than that, and I think you'll find that it is a process, and it works. And you get higher quality, more dedicated volunteers from that. Okay? All right. The one thing that I thought of when I was putting this together, because this really comes from a larger engagement model, is that today, when we're engaging volunteers, and some of you may disagree, but bear with me, I think you'll find that there's a lot of parallels between engaging volunteers and the sales cycle. Now, many of you might not know what sales cycle is, but in general terms, think about it this way. In any company that's selling, a company that sells cars, right? They're trying to attract people to come to the car lot, right? Come see our cars, there's a special on, you got a Corvette, whatever it is. So they're trying to get people to come to them, because that's a lot easier than going to people, obviously. It's like volunteers, right? If volunteers come to you, that's a heck of a lot easier than if you're going out knocking on doors, making calls. The second part is once you've attracted them, Then you have to try and engage with them. You have to try and get commitment from them. And some will commit based on what you're offering, some won't. It's like a car dealership. Some people come on the lot and they say, you know what, you've got exactly what I want. Some say you don't have anything that I want. Some say, I like that car, it's the wrong color. And then your job is to try and convince them that that is the better color. Or maybe you can get the color they want, right? No different than volunteers. Once they come to you being inquired, asked, then you want to try and dig in deeper and see, hey, can I get them to work with us? Is there value in it for both them and us as an organization? The next part of the sales cycle then is for those that have decided to help you out. Then you say, okay, you're going to make the sale, and once you make the sale, you want to keep them coming back. Meaning, from a volunteer standpoint, once they've engaged, they're going to help you with something. I don't want them to help me once they leave. I don't want them to commit to helping and then never show up or call or be able to help or willing to help, right? You want to keep them engaged. When I bought, last summer I bought my first Volkswagen. I've owned every car known. I actually went back, I've owned 32 cars since I was 17. 32 cars, 8 motorcycles, 2 snowmobiles to be exact. But what happened was, when I bought this Volkswagen, I'm heading some new cars, right? About a week later, I get a package in the mail. And I opened up the box from Volkswagen. And on top, and I'm not kidding, some of you have a Volkswagen, maybe have the same experience, there's a letter. And it said something like, hi, I'm John. I'm an engineer that worked on your car. I want to tell you about some of the neat features it has. And he went on and talked about that. Also within the box, of course, there was some promotional materials. If you want anti-mud flaps, call us, right? But there was also a tin box, silver tin box, and when I opened it up, it was a chamois, Volkswagen stamped on. And I thought, wow, that's unique, right? I've never experienced that. I've never heard of other people experiencing that. Has anybody had that with a new car you bought before? Anyways, okay, no. So that's fine. If you buy Volkswagen, I think you will. So when I looked at that and I thought about that relative to volunteers, that's the retention, right? I mean, you're probably getting, if you do have a car, if you ever go to a dealer, you'll get emails from them, you'll maybe get a magazine or something, right? And I get that stuff from Volkswagen. But what I found was that kit that I got that really grabbed me. It made me want to stick around. At least it made me want to read the first magazine that came. So on the volunteer side of things, it's the same thing. Once you've engaged with them, right, they've come to you, you've decided how to work together, they're committed, away you go. How do you keep them engaged? Right? So we're going to walk through those steps today. But if it's helpful, think back to that whole idea of selling cars. There's a lot of parallels between the two. You're really selling your organization, right? If you want to attract and retain volunteers, you start in the right-hand column. What's the value to the volunteer? Many, and I'm not saying you guys, but a lot of people start with, okay, we need volunteers, right? We know we need them for a variety of reasons. So let's start with, who do we have, what expertise, what knowledge do we have in order to actually get those volunteers? So you might say, you know what, Sally has had great success with bringing on volunteers. She's a people person. So Sally has got that left-hand column covered. Then you say, okay, so how do we really attract them? Well, we could hold an event, right? Maybe Sally could have a little breakfast event or attend a conference or make phone calls, whatever it is. And that's how we're really going to get Sally in front of them and engage with them. And when we do that, the outcome will be what you put in the right-hand column. But if you start with the right, you're better driven around what you should be focusing on. If you start with your volunteers, somebody tell me what the value, one of your values to volunteers would be. Anybody? Yeah. Networking, okay. So if you think about networking, the way you approach volunteers, bringing them in, is an association that you have? Okay, United Way, fair enough. So by bringing people in, right, for networking, you would approach that differently than, somebody give me a different one than networking. Build community. So you would approach those a little bit differently. There's some unique differences depending on how you did you say community? Sorry, didn't get eye contact. Depending on how you define your community, right? Whether it be people, whether it be online, whether it be combination, could be a variety. So if you think of networking, building community, if you think of other reasons why you might have volunteers, if you start with your goal, your end result, and you work backwards, it drives how you pursue. Which is a lot better than saying, okay, who are all the people we need and what do we need to make this happen? How do we make it happen? And then here's what we should get in the end. And because a lot of times you get there and say, wow, that didn't work, right? Something failed, nobody likes Sally anymore, whatever it is, right? So I just want to kind of put that out there at the beginning. The day is not built around that, but I just want to kind of change your mindset, if you hadn't already, that you're often better to start in that right-hand column. Because we don't have a lot of what? Time, resources, starts with a C, 4 letters. Yeah. There's a lot of things we don't have, right? So if you're going to invest a lot of time and money up front, get the end, go, wow, that didn't work. That's not going to go over so well, right? So I just want to present that to you as something you can take away, and something if you're ever sitting in a meeting with your peers, with your groups, and they're talking about, hey, we need to get some volunteers around this, you can bring this up and say, here's what we need to do. What do we want? What's the value to the volunteer? Not the value to the organization, value to the volunteer. And we'll be tying some of this stuff into our talk today. Okay, fair enough? Okay. So, anybody's eyes watering? Onion? Just me. I'm the closest one, I guess. My wife actually, when she cuts onions, she makes me do it. Because when we met, I used to have contacts. Just if you have contacts, it doesn't bother you as much, you cut the onion. So, it's true, I cut the onion. But nowadays, I have laser surgery, so I'm, my eyes water as much as anybody else's, right? And I'm not home all the time, so I caught her one day. I had these, I bought for my son these goggles for a snowmobile. She was wearing goggles, cutting onions. And she turns around and looks at me and says, look, not teared up at all, it's great, right? So if onions cause you a problem, get some goggles, you're good. Okay, and I should mention, right, there are a few of these little exercises. If you don't paper, don't worry about it, there's nothing extravagant. But this, the premise of today is not to sit here and listen to me talk, because even I would be bored of that, right? The premise is to hopefully give you something to take away you can use. And I want you to do some exercises because that brings to life your world into what we're talking about. Fair enough? I did this yesterday. I was in front of 104 people in Toronto yesterday. And I did a presentation. We're doing a whole bunch of exercises the whole morning. And somebody said to me at one point, I was walking around in table groups, and somebody said, oh, Shawn, all these exercises. I said, this is a workshop. This is not like a listen shop, right? So, next little exercise I want you to do. We're going to do this with some people around you, okay? So it's not just you and your own. You don't have to write a lot of notes. I want you to just think about, we've already touched on a few of them. What are the most significant challenges your organization, association, right, is facing today, okay? And I want those challenges to be somehow connected to volunteers. But they don't have to be directly. So if you think about it, cash might be indirectly attributed or connected with volunteers, right? And for some, that's a challenge. So just think for a second what those are for yours. Come up with 3. If you have 5, great. But just come up with 3. Think about them, write them down. And I want you to think about that. And then what I want you to do is the person to your, you pick, right or left, or both. If you know them, that's fine. But just stick in your own row. Okay, don't look around you beyond your row. Just talk to them. Here are my challenges. What are your challenges? And see if you can find some parallels. Fair enough? Okay, I'll just give you a few minutes to do that if you're looking for it. So, if you think about some of those challenges, I talked to a few of you before the session, and I asked that very question, okay? And what I come up with were 3. So it's not 25, it's 3. And these 3 were really geared specifically around volunteers, or they were tied very closely to volunteers, okay? On the left, if we're trying to engage volunteers, some of the more significant challenges that I heard from you, which we've captured some of them right there, is first of all, time pressures, right? If I'm trying to engage with a volunteer, it's very difficult to get any of their time. Even if I can convince them to become a volunteer, then getting that ongoing commitment of time, right, for what I need. That's a significant challenge. Everybody is busy today. If you've not noticed, I don't know how we seem to be busier, like I'm busier than I was 5 years ago, and everybody else seems to be the same, right? So time is a significant challenge. And on the flip side, time available to go and find volunteers, to spend with volunteers, to attract volunteers. So it goes both ways. Priorities, it's the second one. So let's say I've got somebody, they're going to volunteer. They said, yeah, no, I'll do that, that's fine. But I'm on 3 other boards, I'm part of 3 other associations, I'm volunteering to stuff, and I just can't do this for you, I can't do that. How do you become a priority for them? Now that, some people think of that and think, oh, that's, they've got their lives, I don't want to intrude, but you really want to be a priority. Because if you engage them, you overcome time, they say, yeah, no problem, I'm going to help you out, and then they don't have time for you because you're not a priority, that's a challenge, right? And the third one was meaningful connections. So in today's environment, how do you do a job, right? How do you perform your job, and then go out and find volunteers, and then connect with them on a meaningful level? I mean, not just, hey, how are you? How are the kids? Oh, that's right, you don't have kids, sorry, right? How do you have some sort of meaningful relationship? How do you stay connected with them? How do you remember stuff about them so that, in fact, you can have a meaningful discussion with them? So those were 3 that came up time and again with the individuals I spoke to, okay? So I'm only going to solve 3 of 25, but that's not bad, right, for an hour of your time? So if you think about that last one, right, meaningful connections, here's what the other questions that get posed. Is social media, does it have value? I mean, you know, think about meaningful connections. Is there value there? Could be. Now, you say could be, and I'm agreeing. But then over here, there's some shaking of heads, and I'm agreeing. Because social media is all in how you use it, right? It really is. Now, can I have a really tight, close personal relationship? Maybe. Maybe. Seen it happen. But that question, how do I really use social media? Can it help me attract and retain volunteers, is one that lies out there today, right? And there's a lot of not-for-profits I know that are saying, we're not touching social media. There's too many risks around using it, putting information out there, so we're not going to touch it right now. Okay, and I'm going to talk more about social media later, but when we talk about meaningful connections, that was a comment that came up. Another comment, how effective is email? Does it serve a purpose when we're trying to attract and retain volunteers? Right? Email is one way, right? It's information flow. It's not really much of a dialogue, more so I'll send you information, you send me information. So then, how valuable is face-to-face, right? I mean, the challenge there becomes, and I'll touch on it later, but there are, if you look at the very young generation today, and some of you are in the room, so hopefully you don't hate me, but youngest generation today have grown up in technology where social media and texting is the norm, more so than sitting and having long, versed conversations, right? If I go in, I travel a lot, and if I go into a Starbucks or something, you know, I'll sit down with somebody, right? If there's not a lot of tables, I'm not going to bother them, but I'd rather sit down. How you doing? What's new? Do you mind if I sit here? Right? And then work away. I see a lot of the younger generation, they will sit by themselves and they're all, right? Here we go. And I do it too, right? So the question becomes with the generations, what's the best means of communication? Because face-to-face, I was at in December, I spoke in Atlanta, and there was a gentleman from Chevron there, and he was talking about engagement of staff and employees because they bring a lot of younger generation into work on the oil rigs. So right now they're going through a lot of attrition, so they're losing a lot of their older staff, and they're bringing in a lot of new hires, young people, early 20s. And he said one of the challenges they found is that as let's say a manager, right? Somebody who's been in the working force of that company for a while, for them to sit down and talk face-to-face with somebody of a very young age was a challenge because they felt the other party was very uncomfortable in that situation. So Chevron has initiated interpersonal skills training for all young new employees because they feel technology has taken away from that once, you know, the rest of us, it's all we're used to. And think about your own situation, right? Your parents, do they text you? Maybe, but I guess if they do, it's only because that's the only way you'll respond to them, right? It's not their preference. But if you go, you know, I try and stop by my mom's house to, you know, just to run in, run out, pick up my boys or something. Oh, well, come on in, sit down. What's new? How's the kids? Meanwhile, I gotta go. You don't want to be rude, but so we'll touch on communication style a little bit later. But I just want to suggest when we talk about meaningful connections, there's a lot behind that. There's a lot behind the question: how do we really make connections meaningful? Okay. So I want to just do something quick, another little exercise. Now this is we'll have to do this one safely. Eyebrows raised, what is he going to do? Here's what I want you to do. You've talked to people around you and or you know some people probably you're sitting close to. What I want you to do is, now you can stay seated or you can get up and move, and that's the safety part. If you get up and move, that's fine. Just watch, there are bags, cups, all sorts of stuff laying around. I want you just to take a few minutes and I want you to go and meet as many people as you can that you do not know today. That's clear enough, right? Without tripping, falling, crushing anything. And I want you to do that without saying a word. Ready? Go. Conversation. How many of you feel like you could do that with 3 people? How many of you feel like you could do that with 4 people? Okay, I'm gonna go backwards. How many of you feel like you could do it with 2 people? Raise your hand. Okay, so if I combine those, most of you feel like you could start up some sort of meaningful conversation with at least 2 people. All you did, so what were you doing? Tell me some things you were doing to make those connections. Anybody? Eye contact, great. Smiling, yeah, what else? Hand contact?
Honey, try this.
Oh, yeah. What else? Yep. Yes, a number of people were. I noticed that. I found a lot of people at the front here would come up, they'd smile, they'd lip or use, they'd go, and then they'd show their card, right? Like, hello, right, without saying a word. What else? Just approaching them? Yeah. What else?
Open body language.
Open body language? How so? What does that look like? Like, did your arms open right to hug them, or? You have to watch in today's day and age, eh? People might think, yeah. Anything else?
One lady was really smart. She gave me a Twitter address.
Whoa. Now you need to watch and see if she's tweeting about you. Met this really cool person in this fantastic session with this fantastic guy, and we didn't say a word, right? So, how much risk was involved in that? I mean, risk to you. Risk of damaging your reputation, risk of getting hurt, risk none. Right? How much did that cost you? Maybe a little bit of time, right? What did we spend there? 3 minutes? 4? Let me time me. Okay, so it's actually 4.062, Shawn, but I wasn't counting. So, here's what I want to ask you. If you think about meaningful connections, most of you feel like you made some sort of entryway to a meaningful connection, and all you did was make eye contact, maybe shake a hand, present a card, a name, something, right? Smile. Anybody been on the elevator lately? Anybody been in the elevator lately and not checked your smartphone? Raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, okay, so let's say 15 of you, let's say. And how many are in this session? There was 69, 70, something like that, maybe, something around there. So a quarter of you, let's say, have been on an elevator and not checked your smartphone. And when I say not check it, I mean the whole time. Like you didn't say, hey, no, I'm good now. So how many of you that were on the same elevator, weren't checking your phone, you were looking at the door or the new display that some elevators have above the door? So of you that raised your hand, how many were not staring at the door or staring at the display above it, or staring at the floor? How many were looking around at the people in the elevator and staring at them? Okay, so let's say most of you. So of those of you who were in that situation, that were not using your smartphone, you're looking at other people, do you think you missed out on anything by doing that, by not checking your smartphone, or not checking email, or not texting? Are you worse off? Less relationships? I mean, somebody might not know what you had for lunch, but other than that, you're good, right? So again, this goes back to what I said before. It touches on a few areas. It touches on cultural differences, right? But again, if you think about meaningful relationships, oftentimes the initiation of such is just running into people. I learned early in life, and I'll admit to you, I'm an only child, right? So I know you're thinking I'm spoiled. I am not spoiled. My parents believed I would be spoiled, so they did everything to unspoil me. Okay? I guarantee you this. Yeah, I'm making up for it now. They're not paying for that stuff, that's me. Good point, though. So, if I think about myself, right, early in life, I think maybe being an only child, I always seem to have one close friend. In fact, today I would say I have I know a lot of people, but I have 2 really close friends. You may be in the same boat, right? But growing up, I had 1. And I spent all my time with them, period. And the funny thing was, my closest friend was also an only child. Kind of odd. So, if I think about that situation, and I think about my network of friends, I didn't have that many other close friends. I usually walked with my head down, and there was no smartphones. I just walked around with my head down, right? Didn't pay a lot of attention. Went away to college, same thing. Kind of kept to myself, had my own place. I didn't go to a dorm, right? And it wasn't until I was probably in my, let's say, mid-20s, and something changed. I don't know what changed, but I started realizing what a boring, closed-ended, no-friend life I'm leading. I mean, I could know so many more people. I could do so many more things if I just started making eye contact, saying hi to people. You know, if somebody brought a friend around, strike up a conversation about nothing. So for me, that's what changed. And I can't tell you exactly. I have some ideas of why that changed, but it doesn't matter. What I want to suggest today is the younger generations, they're looking at communication differently. And the idea of making eye contact isn't as common as keeping in touch with 250 of your closest friends around the world, right? And I couldn't have fathomed that when I was younger. Right? So everything is changing around the dynamics. And what I want to suggest to you is that is changing how we engage volunteers. Because volunteers are people. They don't necessarily know our world, our work environment, our personal life. They don't know any of that stuff. And our job, if we want to engage volunteers, is to try and figure out how do we find that common ground? How do we open the door to a more meaningful relationship with them? But I'll suggest to you that dropping them an email or sending them a text may work in some cases, depending on the generation, right? In other cases, it's more eye contact. But I think you'll find that eye contact, that smiling, works across all generations. I didn't see, one group of older people over here talking and one group of the Generation X in the middle sending emails and the other group of the youngest over here texting. Right? You didn't see that. We could all do the same thing and we all said the same results. So to start with, I want to suggest to you that if you want to overcome some of those roadblocks, right, and you want to start to engage with others, you need to do a multifaceted approach. What I mean by that is, yeah, the social media has some value. So does face-to-face, so does eye contact, so does phone calls, so do emails, and your approach should include all of those, all of them. No matter how uncomfortable some of them might make you feel. It's difficult to go up and approach somebody in an event you don't know, but you think, who knows? Might build a relationship with them, might be able to bring them on as a volunteer for whatever reason. That can be difficult, but you can do it. I'm standing in front of 69 people I don't know, but hopefully we're having a meaningful discussion, right? So if I can do it, you can do it. I'm an only child, only sound. Drive up Highway 10, turn left, middle of nowhere, there I am. Hello, welcome. All right? So, the next point I want to make to you then, if we talked about how do we really open the door, how do we really start these relationships, how do we really engage with others, what are some of the means? Then we want to address the question, how do we really get the attention of volunteers? I mean, I can strike up a conversation, I can say, hi, how are you? But if there's nothing behind that, it's just going to be a nice to know you, right? I'll friend you on Facebook, you'll see my profile, I'll see yours, and we'll move on, right? So, if we think about how to engage volunteers based on these time pressures that we're talking about and the multiple priorities people are dealing with today, I want to suggest to you that there's steps that you can go through, you can think about when you're trying to do this. There's really 3 steps. First of all, just like we've been talking about, think about the profile of your audience. So who am I trying to engage? Is it someone who's younger, right? What are their preferences and how to contact, how to communicate? What are their interests? What do they find interesting? Once I've got that down and I figured out, okay, and I call that profiling. You've probably heard the term segmentation, right? You segment your members. I like to segment volunteers. I like to segment potential volunteers. Because if I segment them into whatever categories make sense for my purposes, then suddenly I can understand what kind of approach would best work to get their attention, to become a priority to them. That's the second bullet then, is attractive. Now I know what you're thinking, Shawn, you're an attractive guy, but that's not the point. Those of you not smiling are, yeah, clearly. It's a hit to my ego, but that's okay. If you think about attractive, right, you want to make sure that however you're approaching them, whatever you're suggesting, talking about, presenting is attractive to them. It gets their attention. So what I mean is, do you remember when you were younger, you go to see your grandparents, right? Remember that? And you go in and you'd sit down, look at your watch, right? How long are we going to be here for? And your grandparents would say stuff like, wow, look at the weather, right? Did you want some tea? How many tea bags? 2 or 1? I just made some cookies. How was school? Right? I remember my grandfather once came over. I was in my mid-teens, maybe 14 or so. And he came by, and I didn't see him a lot at that point. The older you get in your teen years, the less your grandparents seem cool, so you're doing your own thing. And I started going to the gym, because I was a scrawny little kid, still am today. And he says, look like you're packing on some beef. I said, what are you saying, I'm fat? He goes, no, you're not. I'm just saying you look like you're getting bigger. It just turned me off completely, right? So where's this conversation going? Right? Grandpa, you're a little overweight yourself. Come on. So back then, if you think about those conversations, now some of you have been fortunate, your grandparents have lived much longer than mine. Mine were all gone by the time I was 18, right? But think about some of those discussions. You're probably sitting there sometimes, oh, really? This doesn't make any sense, right? You'd be trying to be polite, courteous. Yeah, okay, no, things are good, Grandpa. Things are good, Grandpa, right? But you're just thinking, what time can I go see my friends? So your message, your approach to the volunteers has to be attractive, right? It has to be appealing. You've opened the door. We've thought about what's their profile. Now we have to think about how do we make our message attractive? Okay? So the third and final point under getting their attention is the appeal. So if you think about a message, you might present it as attractive, but if you just present something that's attractive and there's no real appeal to it, and I'll give you an example in a second, it's not going to grab them. Go back to that sales idea. You go into a car dealership because you see a neat looking car at the road, right? You pull in, wow, that's a nice looking car, no intent of buying it. You start to look, you think, wonder if I can make this happen. Salesman comes over, you say, how much is it? He goes, it's $75,000. You say, okay, I have to go, right? So I was attracted to pull into the dealership, but once I really get in there, although the car was appealing, the price was not. So when you think about your approach, you have to think about those three elements. Who am I speaking to? What's the profile of them? How am I going to attract them, right? How am I going to initiate discussions that get their attention? And then how can I make that message and the ongoing support I need the volunteer appealing, right? So I want to suggest to you then that, well, before I do that, I travel. I spend a lot of time traveling. And when you talk about applying this, so I come home on weekends, right? I'm home during the week sometimes, home other times on weekends. So about a month ago, I thought, okay, I want to go on a trip. I told you I had two close friends. One of them said, hey, we're going to go down to Niagara Falls, have a weekend, right? Haven't done that for 10 years, should do it. I said, that sounds good, but I haven't been home a lot lately, and I've got two young boys. One's 4 and one's 20 months. So my wife's quite busy. So I said, if I go home and just say, hey, I'm going away the weekend, that's not going to fly. When I come home, the first response or second response is typically, you're up. Your turn, right? I've had them all week, you're up. So I thought, how do I approach this? So I thought, okay, I want to go, and I know when I come home, my wife is very helpful. So she helps, I got to get laundry and dry cleaning done, I got to unpack, I got all sorts of stuff to do, and she's very helpful with that. So it is a little bit of work for her when I come home. I know it's a little bit more burden, right? It's like having 3 kids instead of 2. So what I said to her was this. I said, well, when I thought through my message and my approach, obviously I know her profile. I thought, okay. I said, honey, I'm thinking that when I come home a lot, it's a lot of work for you sometimes. Like if I'm really away for 5 days, that can be a lot of work, right? So what I was thinking is this. I've talked to my parents, and coming up in a couple weekends, they're available to take the boys for the weekend. And I thought, you really deserve some time away. You deserve a break. And to be honest with you, I know you're laughing, but she did deserve a break. It would serve both purposes, right? So I said, you deserve some time away. I've talked to your sister. She's available. Love to go shopping to wherever, right? And I got a couple things set up. She's got some ideas. Now, my wife goes, because she's thinking, why is he approaching this? And that is no different than when you engage a volunteer. If it sounds too good to be true, people think it might be, right? So she says, so if I take this weekend away, I'm taking the credit cards, there's no spending limit, right? I can stay at hotels, do whatever. And I said, yep. She said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I don't know. Like, I haven't done anything with Mark for a while. I could maybe call him up. We've been talking about going away, maybe on a trip somewhere. A trip? Where are you thinking of going? I said, I don't know. Like, he's not too far from Niagara Falls. Like, about an hour, so I go there. I don't know. Might not even might just stay at his house. I don't know. She said, I'll think about it. So to me, that's a yes, right? I'll think about it to go. So when you think about that situation, it's very, very similar. Now, I know my wife. You don't know your volunteers, okay? You know some of them, not all of them. But if you think about those steps, that make sense, right? Who am I speaking to? What's the profile of them? What's the best way to approach this? How do I make my message attractive so that when I start, if you just come out and say, I need 16 hours of your time every week for the next year, that's not attractive, right? And go back to that first exercise. What's the outcome? And then once I come up with what is an attractive approach here, how am I going to make this more appealing, more enticing? Which is where you really jump to the end. If we do this, here's what's in it for you, here's what's in it for the organization. Does that make sense? Okay. Nothing mind-blowing here, but again, hopefully I'm giving you kind of a framework and steps you can think through. That's the intent. All right. I'd like to get a volunteer from the front row on the far right. Not being too specific, just general. Volunteer, front row, far right. Your choice. I'm not gonna voluntold. Well, here's what's in it for you. If you like to, oh, see, I don't even have to finish. Oh, no, I do have to finish. Okay. I thought we had somebody there. If you come up, you get the opportunity. You can say hello on the microphone, and you can introduce yourself if you'd like. If you don't want to, I'll pass you the message I'm going to pass you, and I don't mean I'll pretend like you were never here. So it's really both ways, whatever you want. See? I knew it. As soon as somebody asks you questions, questions suggest interest, people. There is lesson number 1A. Come on up. Yeah, I can tell you.
I feel like I should have asked more questions.
No, it's fine. It's easy.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Did you want to say your name and who you
I
are?
can say my name.
Sure, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Laura. I'm from Edmonton, and I'm the volunteer coordinator at Fort Edmonton Park.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you very much. So Laura, thank you very much, by the way, Laura, is going to, remember telephone? Remember telephone? What Laura's going to do is she's going to go in a second to the very end of the row. She's going to provide a message quietly into the ear without blowing or anything weird, right? To the person at the far end, and then that person is going to interpret that message, and we'll just, I want to pass it along. I want to go the first 2 rows on that side, okay? So we'll go across the front to the, I'm sorry, what's your name? Sorry.
Great.
DeRay? That's her name? No, sorry, I was... Yes?
My name is Dawning, the beginning of the day.
Dawning?
Dawning.
Oh, perfect.
Dawning
Well,
of Aquarius.
Dawning of Aquarius, I hear music. Right? Okay, so what Dawning is going to do then is go to you, okay? And you'll pass along that row, and when it gets to the very end, okay? That's the jacket, glasses, okay? Then I want you to tell everybody what the message is. You comfortable with that? Okay, perfect. So you're good, so go to the end of the row. And I don't want you to yell it, you have to be quiet about it. And I don't want people sitting and putting their ears together. Okay, go. Okay, sure. Now you have to introduce yourself. It's like Price is Right, eh? I'm Bob Barker. Okay. You have to speak in the mic.
Do I get to spin the wheel?
No, wheel. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Nicole Medeiros. I'm with Alberta Women Entrepreneurs. And the message that I received was, after this session, you're going to go up the escalator, you're going to turn left, and you're going to look at the sun.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. That's wrong. It's very close, though. Very, very close. Here was the message, okay? When we are done in the session, we should go up the escalator, turn left. Sorry, turn right, didn't it? Sorry, I screwed it up. I can't even read now. Start again. When we're done with the session, we should go up the escalator, turn right, turn left, then look towards the sun. So that was pretty close. That's good. I did this one evening with a group who, this was an after dinner, after an alcoholic dinner. You can't imagine what it was. It wasn't even. So what I want to suggest with you there is kind of building what we're talking about in your messaging. It's all about your, you're not leaving, right? Okay, well, it was nice to meet you. All the best. Okay, I better talk fast then. So if you think about your messaging, you want to make sure that it is crystal clear. Right? If you think about, if you're to engage a volunteer, and they tell somebody else, who tells somebody else, who tells somebody else, what is the chance that by the time it reaches 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th person that it is exactly what you intended it to be? Slim. Right? Even if you type it out, if you're using social media, things get changed. So when we start to think about, we've talked about our approach, we talked about how to open the door and how to really position ourselves in our message, you want to make sure whatever your message is, whatever the value is to that volunteer is crystal clear. Because otherwise you're going to have a hard time engaging them, right? What they understand may be something completely different than what you intended. So, how do we influence then the perceptions, right? And that's around the messaging. So let's say I've told you something, and it's pretty clear to you, but now there is an element of influence. And people typically go, oh, influence, that sounds so bad, right? Volunteers, I shouldn't be influencing them. But you are influencing. You need to influence them. You need to convince them why this is beneficial, right? Sometimes you need to demonstrate to people why something is important to them. And you're not making that up, it's the truth, right? And why it's important to your group, your association, your organization. That's all part of influence. Influence is not a bad word, right? It is if you're in a used car sales lot. Other than that, not a bad word. So, think about influence then, and think about the 3 different factors around influence. And when I put this together, it starts with your mindset, okay? So if you're going to be influential, you have to start with your frame of mind. Meaning, do you get out of bed in the morning and it's, wow, another day, right? I gotta go to work. I should be done at 4. Hopefully I can squeeze an hour lunch out. I'm gonna get my hair cut. I'm gonna pick the kids up. I gotta play baseball tonight. I am so tired. when is the weekend here? It's only Monday, right? Is that your mindset? Because you're wasting most of your life, and it is, side note, right? But the other side is that if that's your mindset, how engaging are you with volunteers? You know, we have to get some volunteers. You know, the boss said, or I got to do this thing and I can't do it by myself, right? And I'm sure you've run into people asking for volunteers that have that kind of frame of mind, or at least you interpret that's their approach. They don't seem to be excited at all about this, right? So it starts with, if you're going to engage volunteers, what's your mindset? The second is thinking about personal styles. Anybody ever here done assessments, DISC assessment, all that kind of stuff, right? You learn more about yourself. Well, if you think about when you're speaking and engaging volunteers, you have to start to think about what is your style, and then once you understand that, what is their style? And we're not going to do a personality assessment, but let me give you something quick and dirty. Maybe more quick than dirty, but nonetheless. Start with, is somebody more, well, start with yourself, right? Are you more introverted or extroverted? Introverted, you're going to have a difficult time approaching people, right? And you would know that about yourself. Extroverted, no problem. Then, once you know that, are you more social or are you more influential? Meaning, if you're a social person, you have no problem talking and talking and talking, right? You place value on groups of people, on teams, on relationships. That is your whole focus. In your work environment, if there's something you don't like, you're the one going around saying, do you like that, Bob? Do you like that? You don't like that? I gotta go tell somebody, we do not like that, right? That's what you do. The other factor then on the introvert are typically those, maybe influential maybe isn't the best word, but they're more the analytical side, right? So they look to data to try and influence the situation, right? So if you're a person that enjoys analysis, for example, you might be on that side of the coin. And there's a lot of framework behind this. I don't want to bore you with that here. But what I want to suggest to you is if you think about yourself and you think, okay, am I more introverted or extroverted? Am I more direct with people in their face? Or am I kind of soft, quiet, stand back in the background? Do I look to analyze things? Do people tell me I analyze it to death? Or I just go and do it, get it done? And do I really enjoy being around people, large groups of people, talking to people, or do I rather be on my own? If you start to think about those factors for yourself, you can identify one or two that really stand out for you. And then once you know that, you can start to use the same questions when you approach other people, right? So here's an example. Myself, I'm pretty direct, and I would say I'm a little bit of an extrovert, although maybe not, right? I'm up here. So if you think about that, if I was going to approach someone and that person seems quiet, I'm not going to go, hey, and as you saw when I asked for a volunteer, I didn't say, hey, come on up, you're talking on the mic, right? Because I said it, we're doing it, and you're doing it, and you're going to love it whether you like it or not. Ask for volunteers, because I know not everybody's comfortable with that. And then I offered an opportunity, your choice. You don't have to say a word, you can just talk to me, or you can talk to everybody if you want. Social, introvert versus extrovert, right? So even in doing that exercise, I'm trying to appeal to other people. I'm keeping in mind who I am, how I approach people, and how they might interpret to be approached. And I'm trying to be flexible in that. And the problem is that we don't think too much about that, do we? We are who we are. This is the way. How many of you have ever said, this is who I am? This is the way I am. Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think everybody said it. They're just not admitting to it, right? So that's what you need to keep in mind. Your personal style, your typical approach to people and situations, and then what's their preferential style, and how should you be flexible in yours to accommodate, right? Just I got a few minutes here, I'll tell you a quick kind of to demonstrate that. So I told you I'm very direct, right? So decisions take me about half a second to make. Not always the best ones, but I can make them quick, right? My wife is the exact opposite. Quiet, reserved, thinks and thinks and thinks. They say opposites attract, right? So, last summer, I had to go speak in Moncton, New Brunswick at a conference. It was in June. I thought, you know what, great time to take the family away, go on vacation. We'll get a cottage for a week, take the kids, be great. I'll speak one day, it's only for a couple hours, and we're done, right? So I didn't have the time to find a cottage, and I would just go, there it is, boom, buy it, we're gone, right? And I thought, yeah, I don't really have time. And I asked my wife, and she's like, well, she had a lot of questions. So, light bulb goes on. I said, you know, do you agree we should take a vacation? Yep. Do you agree that going to Moncton might work? Yeah. Do you agree it can be when I do this conference? Yeah, we can make that happen. How about you find the cottage? Right? She likes to analyze stuff. She likes to think. She spent 2 weeks. She looked at on multiple websites like TripAdvisor and that, finding all sorts of people's reviews, scanning multiple reviews. I never would have done that. There's no way. But you know, she was right. It reached a point during that time that I got tired of waiting. I said, what do you have? She's like, I'm down to 3. I said, we're picking that one, we're going, we gotta get this thing booked, right? So I called, I booked it. And she said, well, okay, but I found on this separate website a few reviews of it, have a read. So I've already booked it. And I'm like, oh, that's not good, you can't go there. Why didn't you tell me, right? So I go back, I canceled that one, had to pay a penalty, and I let her make the decision. Now that's a true story, but what I want to suggest to you is, if I think about her style, and I don't always do it, I just approach it as who I am, right? But when I start to think about her style, I can use it to my advantage, to our advantage. It's the same when you're approaching people to engage them. We've talked all the way through this about what's in their best interest, what's the value to them. And when you're reaching out, communicating, putting your messages together, you have to start to think about, okay, how am I communicating this? Is that something they're receptive to? How am I approaching them? How am I talking to them? Because if you're approaching them the wrong way, ever had somebody that had a great purpose just come running at you with it, you needed to do it now, and you know, get off, no, stay away, right? Give me room. That's all style differences. If you look at somebody today and you think, wow, that person just doesn't get it, anybody ever been in that boat? Style differences are underlying much of that, right? You're both looking at the same information from a different perspective. So, if you think about the styles, what I want to suggest to you then is we need to start thinking about some ingredients to engagement, right? So we've talked a lot about the approach and the message. So how do we really take all this and create engagement? Now, I'll admit that one picture is not that current. I'll let you guess which one that is. I think my father is the only one with a flip phone still. He's figured out how to take pictures on the flip phone. But every time we go take pictures, he's, hold on, oh, I gotta open it. Okay, hold on, all right. So, what I want to suggest to you now is that now that you're into the communication, we've done everything we've talked about, and we're now interacting with people, right? Whether it be to bring them on board, right, or to retain that relationship. We talked earlier about social media, and the question becomes, do we use high tech, like social media, texting, email, newsletter campaigns, all that stuff, or do we use high touch, meaning I'm going out and spending time speaking to people? What I want to suggest to you is it's both. Right? Because if we want to cast a wide net to identify who the best volunteers might be, we have to be approaching it in multiple different ways relative to communication. You can't just use one. You can't say, well, I'm just going to use technology. You can't say, I'm not going to use technology, I'm going to just go speak to people. You have to use both, which makes it more complex, right? Anybody in this room, well, we did it earlier, anybody have their smartphone on them? Yeah? Yeah, it does say turn off. I don't even think I turned mine off, but fair enough. Nobody ever calls. So, anybody in this room not on Facebook? Raise your hand. I would suggest to you there are more, go the other way. More people on Facebook than had phones that we talked about earlier. Is there, I just saw about 10, 11 hands, not 15 or 20. So, if you think about anybody on Twitter, I know one person is, they're handing around their Twitter address, right? Anybody on Twitter, a few of you are? Yeah. They all have their own purpose, right? But if you think about engaging others, high tech is key, right? If you're not using high tech, and I know the challenge becomes, you might say, Shawn, that's all great, I agree with you, but I go back to my organization, they have rules, guidelines around using it, we can't use it, we shouldn't use it. And that's, I mean, that does happen. That's difficult to overcome. But what I want to suggest to you is you do need to be using both. If you think about your association, your organization, or even you, think about Facebook. Facebook provides you an online presence. And what it does is it allows you to create whatever presence you want, right? You could have the worst life in the world, but you could put a great picture up there, post fantastic things about your life every day, and people that didn't know you well would think, wow, you're having a great life. Meanwhile, maybe not, right? So that's kind of the downside, but the upside is, as far as what you're doing and engaging with people, you can send the message out that you want to send. You can use it to present you, your organization, association in the light you want. So if you think about, you've profiled your volunteers, you know what message would be generally appealing to them and attractive, you can start to put that forth online. Right? The good news about online today, and the good news that almost everybody in here is carrying a phone, it makes us accessible at all times. Used to be, I checked email when I got to it, right? Maybe 15 years ago, that was once or twice a day. Then it maybe became 10 times a day. Now it is every, what? Depending if I wasn't up here, probably every 15 minutes, to be honest with you. I'm scanning through, right? Yeah, I know it's horrible, isn't it? So, what online technology has done for us is made everybody accessible. So what I want to tell you is if you're not using online presence, websites, social media to interact with people, don't just put something out there. If you got a website, you can put for 90 bucks a month, for example, you can put a chat line. If you ever go to a website, there's like a chat box that comes up, and that's like $90 a month. And for an association or a corporate, that's not a lot of money, right? So once you have the presence, you want to make sure it's set in the best eyes of your volunteers, and then you want to make sure there's a way to interact with you. That is what brings social media, that is what brings online presence to life, right? And the last point I want to make is, who here has not been to Walmart? Raise your hand. One person, 2 people. So, if you've been to Walmart, who's the first person you see? First person you see, excuse me. Greeter. Why do you think that is? They give you stickers. Fair enough. Everybody needs stickers. Make you feel welcome. Who's the last person to see? Depending on how busy they are. Yep. Walmart's smart. Does Walmart have an online presence? Yeah. You can shop. I think it's even a chat box, shopping, all that stuff, right? Have you ever been to a really high-end restaurant? Anybody? Fairly, I might not talk to you. Yeah, most of you have. What is the difference in how you're greeted, spoken to, and treated versus McDonald's? Difference? Why?
McDonald's is the most friendly place in the world.
Really?
Really. That's where I get a lot of my volunteers from.
McDonald's?
Yeah, put it on the sheet.
Crazy.
McDonald's.
Well, we'll use that. So think about, though, the length of conversations you have might be different. Maybe not for you. I found that going to McDonald's, I have to go to the people.
What does that mean?
No, when I go to McDonald's, right, I have to go to the counter. Nobody comes to me. Nobody greets me at the door, right? So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying people are mean at McDonald's. I'm saying the interactions are different. People meet you at the door, right? They speak to you. They greet you. I've had people, you ever gone to like a hotel or something and they ask your name? You know the doorman, when he asks your name, what he's doing? When you go to the counter, they say, hello, Mr. Casemore, nice to meet you. I'm like, how'd you know that? Well, the doorman's telling them. They've got a radio. They're saying, Mr. Casemore's just arrived. What happens is, and what I'm trying to suggest to you is that the high-touch aspect is what Walmart has realized. They've realized that, yes, we need an online presence. We need a way to interact with people online, but there's value in being out there and talking to people and interacting with people, just like we did earlier. It's a combination of both, right? And the contrast I'm trying to make to you in a high-end restaurant is those interactions are meaningful, right? They've got meaning. So that's the high-touch part. And what the good news about online is, yes, it's made everybody accessible. The other portion of the good news is so many companies are focusing online, not too many people are focusing on the high-touch. So you can differentiate yourself. You can get people's attention by doing things, by reaching out, talking to them, having conversations. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. All right.
At McDonald's.
At McDonald's. Anybody want to go for lunch after? Getting kind of hungry. So, how do you inspire people to action? So I just grabbed these quick. Either your organization or you personally, you have to be able to inspire others, right? And that kind of ties into messaging, but as an ongoing purpose behind your organization, your association, it has to be inspiring. I can't buy into something that's just not that inspiring for me. So I grabbed these. These are just the mission statements. Canadian Cancer Society, for example. To eradicate cancer and enhance the quality of life of people living with cancer. That couldn't be more clear. That couldn't be more powerful to me, right? My mother experienced cancer. Luckily, everything's fine, but that is a powerful, powerful meaning, right? Red Cross, to improve the lives of vulnerable people by mobilizing the power of humanity. The power of humanity in Canada and around the world. That has power. And I'm sure many of you have that kind of statement today. What you need to do is take that statement and make sure volunteers understand what that means. And you need to be able to interpret what that means to you so you can portray that when you're dealing with volunteers. Why would I want to get engaged with the Red Cross? That statement is powerful, but does it have meaning to me personally? That becomes the question that you need to answer if you're trying to engage volunteers. That is how you become inspiring. So think about What's your organization's mission? If you don't know what it is, I'm sure you can find out. What makes you passionate about your organization, right? So maybe you look at the mission and you say, it's kind of disconnected from who I am. That's fine. Why are you there? Now, for those of you just there to pay the mortgage, fine. But the rest of you, there's some passion, right? What is that passion? If you can help other people understand that, that might be a way to really draw them in and inspire them. I think some of these are going to go below the line here. There you go. What are the benefits your organization provides? How can you quantify? If somebody looked at the Red Cross mission, can you say, well, this is exactly what we do? And in terms of people could grab a hold of and say, okay, wow, that's great. That makes sense. And lastly, how does your organization, how does it help people? Okay, it's a big question. But we're talking about volunteers, we're talking about people. This is a busy slide. We're coming to the end, I just want to give this to you. So if you think about General Patton, right? General Patton said he always wanted to get there the firstest with the mostest. That's how he was going to win the war. What I want to suggest to you is if you want to engage and everybody's busy and everybody's got different priorities, you need to keep that mindset. How do you get there firstest with the mostest, right? You can't get everybody's attention out of the gate. But if you're always trying to build relationships and engage people in their best interest and what's valuable to them, then you're putting yourself in the best possible position to engage them. He didn't always win, but most often he did. So here's what I want you to do. This kind of ties together what we talked about. Start with, how do I initiate those conversations, right? So if you think about the initiation phase, you have to have a powerful message, and you want to have expansive relationships. If somebody doesn't want to engage as a volunteer, that's fine. Doesn't mean you don't keep in touch with them, because you never know. Once I've initiated that contact, I've opened the doors like we did earlier, then I want to engage them. Right? That's the sale part that we talked about in the sales cycle. So what's in it? What's valuable to volunteers? What are they going to get out of it? Volunteer or not, they have to get something out of it. Right? That could be anything. It could be a story, an experience, a good feeling. You have to be able to help them realize what that is. And again, we talked about the high tech, high touch. Continuous engagement requires both. And then how do you sustain them as volunteers? You want to be able to demonstrate that value. If they believe there's going to be value coming in, how can they experience that value as you go forward? If you say, you know what, this is going to happen, right? You're going to be able to change this entire process. You're going to be able to change whatever it is. You're going to meet, let's say a networking example, you're going to meet at least 50 new people. They go to some networking events, and they say, you know, I met 2, I'm done. Didn't work. So you have to be able to demonstrate that value. And then you want to reward reinforce, consistently letting them know what's going on, why it's so great, why they're so great, how are they helping, how's their group helping. You have to keep putting that in front of people, otherwise you lose them, right? Think about growing up with kids. We're all people here. To keep kids motivated and engaged, you have to continuously be telling them, that's good, great, right? That's how you keep them around. Keep them interested. So a few things I want to kind of close with, and I have a quick little story for you here, and we'll be done, I think, right on time. I want you to think about, what are your objectives, right? What are your objectives for engaging volunteers? About a week ago, I spoke to engineers, and I was thinking this through. Instead of saying volunteers, I kept saying engineers. I almost made it, and then I just did it now. Anyways, stuff happens. So, think about what are your objectives in engaging volunteers, but more importantly, what are their objectives? How is this in their best interest? What's valuable to them if they are a volunteer? How will you catch and maintain their attention? Right? We just walked through a slide on how you can do that. What's the best message for you? And how do you get that to your volunteers? And how can you increase the velocity? If you follow that last slide, that helps you increase the speed in which you can attract and retain your volunteers. Because it is truly a process. I'll end with this. In the circus, right, there's the bearded lady and the world's strongest man. They fell in love. And not too long after they fell in love, they decided to get married. Not too long after married, she fell pregnant. So one day, the gentleman running the circus, ringmaster, I guess you call him, he said, you know, got a baby, have you figured out what you're having? She said, no, don't know yet. He She said, oh, well, you know, as long as it's healthy, that's the main thing. And she said, well, health is good. I mean, we're looking forward to a healthy baby, but our key objective is to make sure that that baby fits in the canon. My question to you as we depart today is if some lady who had a beard and a short, strong, tall man, whatever you want to call him, approached you and they were going to stick their unborn baby in a cannon, how would you carry that conversation forward to engage them as a volunteer? Thank you very much.